Well, celebrations in Ho Chi Minh City have marked 50 years anniversary since the end of the Vietnam War, when North Vietnam's communist forces took control of Saigon. Our correspondent Bill Birtles is in Ho Chi Minh and he joins us now. Bill, good to have you with us. Now, this was quite the spectacle, wasn't it? I mean, what were some of the things that stood out for you?
Well, Girish, it was quite an impressive display of military formations. There were dozens and dozens, the Army, the Air Force, Special Combat Troops. There was a women's brigade for pretty much every formation seemed to have a male brigade and a female formation. You also had the Chinese PLA troops, Cambodian troops, troops from Laos. So the military aspect of it, I think, was quite impressive. You had, I think, more than 30 formations in total, and it's just always quite impressive to see those sorts of displays because obviously you don't see them in the Western world too much. Over the top in the skies, you had Russian-made Sukhoi jets, you had helicopters, but there was a big difference, Girish, in this parade compared to one I went to in Beijing in 2019. When China last did a major military parade, there was a huge amount of hardware, missiles, drones, those sorts of things being paraded, whereas in Vietnam, the troops were certainly there, but it was a lot more light on when it came to hardware aside from those planes. So in a way, it was impressive, but not menacing in the way that the one in Beijing was in 2019 that I was at.
And speaking of China, there were Chinese troops on display in the parade in Vietnam as well. What does that signify?
Yeah, the Vietnamese had delegations from three communist or socialist-friendly neighbouring countries, China, Laos and Cambodia. They all sent formations of soldiers to march in the parade. So this isn't unexpected. It's the sort of thing you would probably see every 10 years when they hold these sorts of parades. But what was noteworthy, I guess, is that China had PLA soldiers marching. The other great power in the world, the United States, well, you wouldn't expect them to have troops marching in something like this, of course, but reports came out in the New York Times a few days ago that the Trump administration had told US diplomats based here in Ho Chi Minh City not to attend any of the festivities marking the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. So that seems a little strange given that 50 years, 5 decades is a long time, but that was, according to the New York Times, an order given from the White House. And so you have the Chinese troops marching, the other great power of the world, not even their diplomats attending as a courtesy.
Bill, you've had the chance to speak to some former correspondents who covered the Vietnam War. They were there. What have they told you on this occasion?
Yeah, so Australians, people like Peter Munkin and David Brill, they were a news team covering the last 5 years of the Vietnam War in the early 1970s. They said actually after the pullout of US troops in '73 and the pullout of Australian troops, a lot of the international press left. And the conflict became a little bit of a back burner issue, but they returned in April 1975 as the fall of Saigon was very clearly going to happen soon at that point. And they said this city back then was obviously a war zone, it was chaotic, it was very poor. To come back now 50 years later and to see the tremendous progress, to see all the new buildings and just to see how gracious the Vietnamese people have been towards citizens from countries that were on the other side of that conflict. Those veteran newsmen said that that was very touching and something that was very valuable to them.
Yes, and this occasion is one to reflect as well for so many Vietnamese who themselves fought, including, the Vietcong guerrillas. What have they had to say?
Yeah, we were speaking to a former Vietcong guerrilla who spent the best part of 12 years living in and out of tunnels in central Vietnam. He actually lost his arm in an aerial attack. He was involved in operations against US and South Vietnamese forces. And now he works as a guide at the Cu Chi tunnels, which is a very popular tourist spot. It gives tourists the opportunity to go and head down into some of those tunnels and get a little bit of an idea of what it was like. And he said 50 years on, the memories of combat are still vivid. The memories of his comrades helping him get to a hospital, once he had that injury to his arm. That's still very fresh in his mind. The other thing he said is that the young generation in Vietnam, of course, they can't really relate to the hardships of his generation, but they're always keen to learn and they have great regard for the history. And that's something too, Girish, that we've heard speaking to young people here, that even though it's hard for them to fathom what Vietnam was like 5 decades ago, they very much are keen to learn and very mindful of just how difficult and what sort of sacrifices the older generations made.
Yes, and what's been the mood like there in Ho Chi Minh City outside of the parade? I mean, it does look very colorful behind you, but how is the city in general, or the country in general, been vibing, you know, as this coming ahead towards this 50th anniversary?
Yeah, well, Girish, this celebration is continuing tonight. You have people heading to the riverside to watch a fireworks display, to watch a huge drone display. It's one big celebration, and that was the mood over the past couple of days. We've been in Ho Chi Minh City, hanging out in central parts of the town, talking to people who are wearing the Vietnamese flag. They're taking photos in front of the Ho Chi Minh statue or other landmarks. It really is very, very festive. Last night I had an opportunity to see some of these Vietnam War veterans, obviously from the North Vietnamese communist side. They were walking around in uniform and you had young people taking selfies with them. So there is a huge amount of respect for them. There is a very proud and celebratory mood here among all generations, old and young. Now, you do have to remember, of course, that outside of Vietnam, this anniversary is seen in somewhat of a different light, particularly by some refugees who had to leave Vietnam in the mid to late 1970s in the aftermath of the communist takeover of the South. I was speaking to one organisation in Australia that's actually been holding a small protest outside the Vietnamese embassy in Canberra. They say that they will continue this activism so long as Vietnam continues to be under the rule of a one-party authoritarian state. So it's not exactly an anniversary where everybody is celebrating, Girish, but certainly here in Vietnam, it is a very festive mood.
Yes, it's been quite the spectacle today. Bill Birtles in Ho Chi Minh City, thank you so much.
Thank you.